Hi, I'm Don Pfister. I'm here with Meike Piepenbring, and we are at the International Mycological Congress in the Netherlands. It's August 13th, and I'm very happy that you're here to talk to us. Now, I know that you've been studying mycology for a long time, but can you tell us about the beginning of your career and how you got started?
Yeah, well, I was first interested in biology. I studied my biology in Cologne and in France. And in this time, I got fascinated by biodiversity. And first, I focused on plants. So I was enthusiastic about the diversity of plants, their ecology, diversity of forms, functions, and so on. So I did my master in plant anatomy. But then I noticed that for plants we know a lot, there are few species to be discovered, and I was looking for another area within biology, looking for biodiversity challenges. And that's how I discovered fungi. I was in Cologne, and I knew I don't want to stay in Cologne because there was no real opportunity for biodiversity research there. So then I heard, if you want to study fungi, you have to go to Tübingen at that time. And that was the Oberwinkler school at that time in Tübingen. So I went for one day to Tübingen. I got to know the research group there. I got to know Franz Oberwinkler. And I listened to people who were just working in the tropics. They just came back from a field trip to Costa Rica. And then I knew, wow, that's what I want. This is my future. I want to study fungi and I want to go to the tropics. That was my start in mycology. So I was recently graduated in biology. I went to Tübingen. I listened to Franz Oberwinkler's teaching and I did not understand anything because mycology is like a world on its own, and I had to learn again, to go to lectures, to practicals, but that was really fast because I was so fascinated by fungi.
But then you ended up in the tropics.
Yes, then I chose a topic for my PhD, which were smut fungi in Costa Rica. I traveled several times to Costa Rica to collect smut fungi, and at the beginning it was really frustrating because I did not find them. I almost did not know them, but then with the second visit I learned how to know how to find the hosts, and then I was successful and did my PhD on smut fungi in Costa Rica.
But you went back too, to Latin America. You have a history in Latin America.
Yeah, sure. I fell in love with Latin America. I got to know the language, the people. So I applied for postdoc funding to look at smut fungi in Central America, Mesoamerica. So I traveled to all the countries between Panama and Mexico and to Cuba. And later I had a postdoc project for smut fungi of the neotropics. So that was from Mexico until Bolivia. That's how I got to know the neotropics.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. However, then I noticed that smut fungi is a really small group of fungi, and I observed so many other interesting fungi in the field. Then I decided, instead of looking at just one group in a huge geographical area, to look at several groups in a smaller area. And I chose Panama as a focus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And in Panama, you studied all of these different fungi. You have a favorite?
A favorite fungus?
Yeah, from that period
Yeah,
in
from
Panama.
that period. Yes, that's certainly Mycosyrinx cisi in Cicocicioides. It is a smut, but a really curious smut because it infects a Vitaceae, so a plant belonging to the vine family. And this smut causes the development of a witch's broom, a highly complex branched structure formed by the plant. And the plant forms tiny lateral branches which are hollow. And inside these flutes, that's Mycosyrinx, they are the smut spores. They are composed of 2 cells, and I documented scientifically for the first time the germination of those spores. There are, for each spore, there are 4 basidiospores growing outside, and they have the shape of pelican heads, like the head and the beak. Yeah, so that's Mycosyrinx, a really crazy fungus, which I documented, and was really fascinated by this.
Great. And where are you now?
Yeah, now I'm professor at the University of Frankfurt, and the first thing I did when I obtained this permanent position was to establish a long-term collaboration project with Panama. So I traveled many times also for teaching. I lived in Panama for 2 years. That was 2008 and 2009, and there I was teaching mycology to Panamanian students. My main interest at this time was to go to the field and to discover fungal diversity over all groups, even lichens and everything. That was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it was a privilege because the results were not so helpful for high impact publishing, because it was only collecting morphology, trying to find names, but it was highly rewarding, and these experiences are really exceptional, I think. I was able to observe the phenology of the fungi over the years. I observed what happens when the rain starts, when all the mushrooms grow up very fast and with very fragile fruiting bodies, quickly liberating spores. We observed phenology of plant parasites, which was also very interesting to see that semi-deciduous forests have they exchange their leaves at some time of the year, and thereby they eliminate the pathogens. So they successfully reduce the load of pathogens, which later develops over the months again. So there's a lot of dynamics and ecological.
So you're teaching now, and I know that you've produced textbooks. Talk a little bit about teaching and what your approaches are and your philosophy of teaching.
Yeah, I observed that fungal diversity is really huge, so we need a lot of help by young mycologists, and one person on her or his own cannot do this job. So we need a team, we need good teaching, and we need to share the enthusiasm about fungi in order to promote mycology. So then I observed that there was no good textbook for the approach I had towards the diversity of fungi. So I used the evening hours in Panama when I lived there to write a textbook on tropical mycology. This book is published in Spanish and English by APS Press, and it helps a lot for teaching in the tropics now. However, when I came back to Germany, my students, they were asking me, why is there now a textbook on tropical mycology in English and Spanish? What about German and general mycology? At this time, I thought that Franz Oberwinkler should do this job because his knowledge was really huge, and he was a very good teacher. However, he did not find the time to do this job. He died very early, unfortunately. So, with this situation, then I decided that I should do the job. So I also wrote a textbook in German, and it's published with Springer editorial.
We were talking fairly recently about life cycles. Mm-hmm. And you have a very distinct view about life cycles and how you use them in teaching.
Yeah. Well, first, I must admit that life cycles of fungi are really complicated. And I remember from my own experience that it took me a long time to understand what it means to have a life cycle, because it's changing over time, and we have fungi which change completely, not only morphology but also the ecology changes depending on the fungus, so it's really complicated. I observed that available life cycles are difficult to understand because depending on the author, it's this way round or the other way round, and the details depicted change from one author to the other. So I analyzed these life cycles, and I also had very nice examples by Franz Oberwinkler, who also worked on this topic. And then I learned how to do vector graphs with CorelDRAW. So I was able to make all the tiny drawings, the schematic drawings of key elements of life cycles. And I decided, okay, so my life cycles always go clockwise, and if there is an asexual phase, it's on the right-hand side, and the sexual phase is on the left-hand side, and it should grow like this. Yeah, so then it's easy to compare life cycles from one group with the other, and there is, I think it's much easier to learn and to understand now the life cycles with these patterns.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah, and I decided to make them open access. They are on the internet, and I did not give the copyright to any of the publishers. That was a good decision because this helps other people to use them, because that's the idea, to use them in teaching. I have contact in Brazil for translation into Portuguese. I have versions in Spanish, English and German, and it's easy to translate into French, and I'm always happy when people tell me that they use them. That's the idea.
No, it's really important, and you're right, the complexity of life cycles always throws students off.
Yeah.
To really get it right. I wonder, you've had such a varied career in a way of traveling and being out in the field and so forth. What's your advice to your students who are wanting to follow in your footsteps? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I tell them to start at home. Yeah, go to the forest at home, learn how to look at nature, have a hand lens, yeah, and don't walk fast, but slowly to observe the plants, the animals, and then if you know the plants and the animals, then look for differences. Look for patterns that are not normal, for different colors, structures, and then you should have the lens, experience, and a microscope to discover the microscopic world of fungi. However, insects, mites, they are also highly interesting. So I was not sure whether I should go to entomology or mycology. Entomology would also have been a very fascinating field of interest. However, I don't like to kill animals, including insects, so mycology was a good choice. Yeah, and when you know the biodiversity at home, then you can start to travel to European countries. I did it towards France. And then learn how to compare diversity, what is similar, what is different. And with this experience, it's a good idea to go to the tropics, because the biodiversity in the tropics is just overwhelming. And I feel that it's really important to have this enthusiasm about biodiversity in order to be motivated to protect the environment, to maintain these highly diverse ecosystems.
Yeah. You must have seen a lot of environmental change in Latin America.
Yeah, the global change is present in the tropics since many years, actually. When I worked in Costa Rica, I also visited indigenous communities, and already that was in the 90s. I asked the indigenous people, what is the most difficult challenge that you are facing? And I expected them to say something about health care or something like that. Already in this time, they told me the most difficult aspect of our life is the fact that we cannot predict anymore weather. In the past, they knew when to clear the forest, when to have the seeds to grow the plants, when to harvest. They don't know anymore. Because the weather is crazy in the tropics, and that's a tendency which is present since many years. Then I observed deforestation, for sure. Every time I go to Chiriquí, that's western Panama, I see that the frontier between fields and cloud forest is more upwards in the mountain. There are national parks, but very few people responsible for huge areas with a very low salary. So I can't blame the foresters, to accept some money just for some trees to be cut and carried away. So that's really difficult. And in Panama, now it's really already economic problem, the fact that the water supply for the Panama Canal is in danger.
Right.
And there is money in the game, so they know that they have to protect the forest around the canal. They did so, but not strongly enough. So now they have the problem that there is not enough water, so they can't. There's a restriction now concerning the number of ships going through the canal every day.
And the ships are bigger, and they've built another canal.
They built further locks, and now they need even more water. But it's only water from the Rio Chagres. There's no pumping in the Panama Canal.
Right.
So they completely depend on natural resources for the functioning of the canal.
Right.
Yeah, that's
good. Is there anything you'd like to add to the future here? We're recording history, but we're kind of projecting as well.
Yeah, well, my personal projection was then the step to the paleotropics and to work with a colleague in Benin. I traveled several times to Benin to collaborate for the development of mycology there. I observed that in comparison to Latin America, the situation in Africa is much more difficult. They are working in very poor conditions, and there are many people still living in villages without electricity and running water. But they have still a lot of traditional knowledge concerning how to work on the fields, how to use the forest, how to store food. There is no fridge, there is no plastic, so they have the old tradition of how to survive with their environment, with their immediate environment, close to the villages. And when in our countries, like Netherlands, Germany, when here everything collapses without electricity or drastic climate or weather events, in Africa they will survive because they still know how to survive with natural and few resources. Yeah. So that's an amazing experience that I had the possibility to make. And it's not really related to fungi in first place, but for sure fungi can contribute to sustainable solutions for survival and how to protect nature.
Yeah, great. Mm-hmm. Good. Well, thank you. It's been really interesting to talk to you and hear about your career and your interests.
Yeah,
thank you.